YouTube followers. Thank you so much for tuning in to another one of our Lost Building videos. I'm Kathy, and I'm here today to talk to you about another of the houses that belong to one of the enslaved families here at Somerset. And today we're talking about structure number 5. So the house that was right next to Judy and Lewis's house that we talk about on our guided tour. And that house would have been right here. So right about where I'm standing, there was an 18 by 18 house here that looked very similar to the reconstructed home of Judy and Lewis that you get to see on our guided tour. In 1843, there were 12 people living in this structure, and Ishmael Harvey, he was the head of this family. His wife Nancy Buncombe, both of them were 55, and then her son Harry lived with them as well. He was 32. And then Ishmael and Nancy had 5 of their kids living with them. Richard and Ishmael, they were in their 20s, and then Davidson, John, and Tony, they were teenagers. And also they had grandchildren by their daughter Jenny living with them. Jenny was the only one of their children who was not living in this structure in 1843. Her children, Angelina, Victoria, Washington, and Ransom, they were very young children. They lived here with their grandparents and uncles. Ishmael Sr. was born in 1779, likely on one of the Collins plantations in Edenton, and he was brought to Somerset around 1819 when he meets and marries Nancy. And they were married for 37 years in 1848 when he passed away at 69. They had 6 children total, 5 of whom, as already mentioned, were living in this building in 1843. Nancy was a member of one of the earliest enslaved families brought to Somerset. There were several individuals purchased from Edward Buncombe's estate, located in what is now Roper. These people were purchased in 1787, and Nancy was born in 1788, but we have this proof that her family was already here on the property. They were already enslaved here at Somerset when she was born. Her first child, Harry, was born when she was 19 in 1807, and we're not clear on who his father was. He takes on the Harvey name of his stepfather. Her son, Richard, was born in 1811. He was 37 when he passed away in 1848. He had been listed as infirm in 1847. We're not really sure what kind of injuries he had sustained, but he passes away at 37. Her son Ishmael becomes a very well-respected cobbler here at Somerset. He was a shoemaker. Daughter Jenny, who was not living here in 1843 when that list of families was compiled, she and her husband, Washington Bennett, were living on a Collins property in Edenton at the time, and later on her children do join her sometime between 1840 and the Civil War. Her children come to Edenton and live with them. They also have 2 more children, Arthur and Rosetta, after that 1843 list was compiled. This family lived through some traumatic experiences that we have documented in our records. We have a letter from Charles Pettigrew dated June 4th, 1856, in which he discusses how on the previous day, June 3rd, one of the enslaved houses here at Somerset had burned down, and it was actually this house. We know that it was Nancy Buncombe's house, as he referred to it. He talks about how the house was completely engulfed in flames. He sent his enslaved workers over here to try to assist. He tries to assist. People were trying to take water from the lake to put it out, but in the end, all they could really do was preserve the houses on either side. So that was the only house that burned down that day. But that would have been a really traumatic experience in this family, and certainly as we move into the 1860s, we see the trauma of war affecting the enslaved community here at Somerset Place, and it certainly affects this family. During the Civil War, the Collins family sought refuge in the Piedmont area of North Carolina, and Josiah actually established a new plantation in Franklin County called Hurry Scurry. And to this new plantation, he moved the able-bodied enslaved workers from Somerset. So Nancy stayed behind. She was older. Her son Harry, he was 55. He also stayed behind. But Ishmael and Caroline, they were sent to Franklin County, and Ishmael was hired out to the North Carolina Railroad Company as a cobbler. Davidson had married Lovey Cabarrus, who was one of the enslaved cooks here at Somerset, whom we talk about when we take our visitors into the owner's kitchen. Although there were no actual battles on Collins property here on Lake Phelps. During the first visit of federal troops to Somerset Place in July of 1862, Lovey was raped in the kitchen by one of the soldiers. We know about Lovey's assault from a letter written by George Patterson to Josiah Collins while he was in the Piedmont. And you can look at these letters. There are 2 of these letters. you can read them on our website. We're going to put links in the description to these letters. It was not long after her assault that Lovey and Davidson were forced to migrate to the Collinses' new plantation in Franklin County. She would have been separated from her mother, and Davidson, of course, was separated from his mother, Nancy, and his brother, Harry. Tony and his wife, Amy Wood, were also sent to Franklin County, where he was hired out to the railroad and then also worked at the Confederate Army's Pettigrew Hospital in Raleigh. By the 1880 census, we know that Harry and his wife, Elizabeth, along with Ishmael and Caroline, Washington and Jenny, Tony and Davidson, were back in this area with their families. Washington and Jenny acquired 10 acres of land in Cresswell, and their son Ransom, who had been just a baby when the family was living in this house in 1843, he became a successful farmer, and he became the first constable of Cresswell after the town was incorporated in 1874. Thank you so much for tuning in to our video about the Harvey family who were enslaved here at Somerset Place. If you'd like more information, please go on our website. We're going to post links in the description to the letters that I mentioned. And please follow us if you haven't already. If you haven't subscribed, we would love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Post some comments, ask us some questions. We would love to hear from you. And have a nice day.